Assalamu alaikum and hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about an overview of ELT methods and approaches. We all know there are so many methods and approaches in ELT. This is the timeline of teaching methods by T.J. Taylor. First, it was grammar translation method. Grammar translation method was introduced in the late 19th century. And then in the early 20th century, there were two popular methods used, which were grammar translation method and direct method. In the midst of 20th century, we saw there was audiolingualism. And then in the early 1970s, three teaching methods were introduced, which were silent way, physical response, total physical response, and community language learning, followed by suggestipoedia in the midst of 1970s. Communicative language teaching, or CLT, was introduced in the midst of 1980s. CLT is the cornerstone of language teaching approaches or methods because CLT emphasizes on communicative competence among the learners. So I would like to start with grammar translation method because this method was widely used in the early 20th century. And until now, it is still being used in certain parts of the world, for example, like Middle East and also in China. As I mentioned earlier, grammar translation method was introduced in the late 19th century to early 20th century. This method focuses on grammar rules and direct translation. It was used to teach reading passages where teachers chose the reading passages and teachers translated the target language into the native language. So writing skills were not the emphasis was on writing skills, but not on oral production. So for this method, they focus more on this translation. And followed by a communicative language teaching method, which was introduced in the midst of 1980s. In Malaysia, we adopt CLT for our school syllabus because the focus of CLT is very much on the communicative competence. Using this method, we aim to get our students to be able to communicate using the target language. And the teaching stresses on the use of authentic materials and meaningful tasks. So students are asked or are required to conduct activities or to do tasks which are meaningful to them. Students play an active role in class while teachers are just facilitators and teachers talk less but listen more. So students are the one to do activities in class, either through group work or individually. So according to Richard and Rogers, the kind of language and learning activities which served as input to the learning process reflected the learner's communicative needs outside of the classroom and no longer on grammatical items. In other words, CLT focuses on meaning but not on forms. So that is why CLT was widely used in Malaysia in the early 1980s in Malaysian schools because we want our pupils to be able to communicate. And then followed by active learning. Okay, we know that in CLT, students should play an active role. Starting from there, okay, all the new syllabus also focus on the active participation from students. So according to Dale, he said If we read, we will remember 10% of what we read. If we hear, we will remember 20% of what we hear. For watching, we will remember 30% of what we see. And then if we see and we hear, okay, we will remember 50% of what we hear and we see. And then, but if we do, okay, we participate, we do demonstration and we get involved in it, we will remember 70% of what we say and we write. And then if we do, we remember 90% of what we do. So here, taking from here, we say, okay, students got to do. They cannot just sit down, listen to the teacher, but they have to play the active role and have the hands-on experience. They have to use the language. They have to practice using the language in class, and therefore they will remember, they can remember 90% of what they do. Okay, as in active learning, it is very important when they say, what I hear, I forget, what I see, I remember, but what I do, I understand. Okay, there are different types of active learning. In active learning, we have project-based learning, we have problem-based learning, we have collaborative learning, and cooperative learning. These different types of learning are conducted in a different way. All right, and then we found that most of our students, they were not critical. Okay, we need to inject some kind of higher order thinking skills in our students. So therefore, we return to HOTS. We call it HOTS, or higher order thinking skills for students. So we use the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. So we do not focus on the lower part of Bloom's taxonomy, which are remember, understand, and apply. But we would like our students to be able to analyze and evaluate and even to create. So this is the higher order thinking skills. But how to do that in class? Okay, so teachers got to encourage students to be creative, to be critical. So in the teaching. Okay? One of the research that we conducted, okay, on HOTS, how HOTS questions are used in the ESL classroom. We found that in the classroom, teachers are more prone to pose display questions compared to differential questions. 96.08 questions were display questions, while only 3.92 were referential questions. Okay, what is display question and what is referential question? Display questions is the single word or short response, while referential questions require a longer response. So here, referential questions are categorized as HOTS questions. So it shows here our teachers, they are more prone to use LOTS questions. So when we ask why teachers do not use HOTS questions, they said because students could not give longer response. When we ask HOTS questions, students do not know how to answer. So what does the teachers do? They break up the questions into small chunks, and then the students just answered yes or no with short response as a guided questions. All right, and then we go on to these 21st century skills. In this the new millennium, okay, we identify students need to have new skills. There are 4 C's, they call it, 4 C's of 21st century skills. We have critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. So in English class, we are not only focusing on communication, but we also we also gear our students towards critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. So here, the same like CLT, in our 21st century class also, we get students involved in collaborative learning, cooperative learning, and a lot of group work. All right, I'm sure that you have heard blended learning before. Blended learning is a very popular method used in the 21st century. Blended learning is a combination of traditional face-to-face method and online learning. So traditional classroom, in the classroom, teacher focused on class discussion and assessment and activities, while online, the teachers can use online for providing online resources and then giving students for individual activities and for students collaboration. So online learning here can be, is like resemble this self-access learning, but it is online. Right, and then later on in 2015, Ministry of Education of Malaysia introduced the roadmap for English language education reform in Malaysia. And here, the ministry introduced the use of Common European Framework of Reference, or CEFR. Okay, what is CEFR? CEFR is to establish levels of proficiency for each level of the school system against the CEFR. So for example, for preschool, we expect the students to get this A1 level. And then when they move to the primary school, the English language skills will move to the A2, and followed by secondary school will be B1 or B2. In the post-secondary school, students will be at B2. And when they enter university, at least they are at B2 level and they can move to C1. For teacher education, like for example, TESOL students, they need to have C1 before they graduate. All right, what do A1, A2, B1, B2, and C1, C2 mean? Okay, based on the CEFR, okay, A1, A2, there are 6 levels: A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. For A is for the basic users. We start with A1, remember, the preschool kids. And then to be independent, so students in the university, we are expecting them to be independent users of English language. And for C is proficient, therefore students, TESOL students who are graduating, who will be English teacher, we are expecting them to be at the C level, that is proficient users. Right, we have seen the evolution of language teaching approaches and methods in Malaysia, from grammar translation method to CLT, communicative language teaching. CLT was used quite some time in Malaysia and still being used in Malaysia. Active learning. Now we have active learning, and then we went to HOTS, and then now we are into 21st century learning, and blended learning is a must in Malaysian education system, especially in the university, and CEFR is a must in the school syllabus. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.